President Gonzalez, the stream is live.
Welcome to the Board of Education meeting. I call the meeting to order. Ooh, I know, right? I've never done that before. I want to remind those speaking during tonight's meeting that we are using closed captioning on the YouTube live stream. So please speak as clearly as possible. With that, we will move to the Pledge of Allegiance. I ask that you stand if able and join me in saying the Pledge of Allegiance in English and Spanish. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United
States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God.
Next on our agenda is item 1.3, acknowledgement of tribal lands. We gratefully acknowledge the Native peoples on whose homelands we gather, as well as the diverse and vibrant Native American communities who make their home here today. Next on our agenda is item 1.4, moment of silence. So I'd like to ask for a moment of silence for those who have given their lives in service to their country. All right, next on the agenda is our roll call. Ms. King, may I have a roll call, please?
Janelle Astorga.
Here.
Ronaldo Tomorito.
Here.
Heather Benavides.
I'm present.
Crystal Tapia Romero.
Here.
Josefina Dominguez.
Here.
Courtney Jackson.
Here.
Danielle Gonzalez.
Here. Next on our agenda is agenda adoption with item 2.1. So we need a motion for the adoption of the March 20th, 2024 Board of Education meeting agenda.
I move to adopt the March 20th, 2024 Board of Education meeting agenda with the exception of item 6.4, amendment to the APS Board of Education Governance Manual, emphasizing the board president's role in seeking legal counsel on board's behalf.
You jumped in very quickly there,
sorry.
and I was going to read the next part of my script, which says, per the APS Board of Education Governance Manual, board members have up to 4 days before a meeting to request items be removed from the consent agenda and placed on the action agenda for discussion and consideration. This is the only time before or during board meetings that items will be open to be removed from consent agenda for separate vote. The New Mexico Open Meetings Act requires that a final agenda be posted within 72 hours of the meeting. So per the governance manual, we cannot adjust the agenda during the meeting. So is there a motion to adopt the March 2024 Board of Education meeting agenda as is?
I move to adopt the March 20th, 2024 Board of Education meeting agenda as posted.
This is Crystal, I'll second.
Thank you. We have a motion from member Jackson and a second from member Tapia Romero. Can we have a roll call vote, please?
Janelle Astorga.
Yes.
Ronaldo Tomorito.
Yes.
Heather Benavides.
Yes.
Crystal Tapia Romero.
Yes.
Josefina Dominguez.
Yes.
Courtney Jackson.
Yes.
Danielle Gonzalez.
Yes. Next up is minutes approval, for which we need a motion for approval of the minutes from the Board of Education meeting on March 6th, 2024, and the Policy Committee meeting on March 4th, 2024. Before we have that motion, I just want to add the March 4th Policy Committee meeting minutes show that the committee voted twice on item 4.1. That was an editing error. The committee voted only once to recommend for approval the superintendent evaluation process as amended. When making the motion to approve the minutes, please note the change. And with that, may I have a motion?
I move to approve the minutes from the Board of Education meeting on March 6th, 2024, and the Policy Committee meeting on March 4th, 2024, noting the amendment as stated by the board president.
This is Krista, I will second.
Thank you. We have a motion from member Jackson and a second from member Tapia Romero. Ms. King, can we have a roll call vote, please?
Janelle Astorga.
Yes.
Ronaldo Tomorito.
Yes.
Heather Benavides.
Yes.
Crystal Tapia Romero.
Yes.
Josefina Dominguez.
Yes.
Courtney Jackson.
Yes.
Danielle Gonzalez.
Yes. Next on the agenda is agenda item 4, which is public forum. Secretary Astorga, will you please share the instructions for public forum?
Thank you. Welcome to our public forum guests. When you signed up to speak, you were asked to review rules and expectations, which our presiding officer will enforce. The New Mexico Open Meetings Act requires that our agenda specify in advance the items that will be discussed and voted on during the meeting. Therefore, public forum isn't a dialogue among speakers and the board members, but rather a chance to hear from our community. We will call participants to speak in the order they signed up, whether in person or virtual. Those here with us tonight will be asked to come to the microphone at the back of the room when their name is called. Online guests will stay in a virtual waiting room until it is their turn to speak. We have set aside 45 minutes for public comment. If there are 22 or fewer speakers, you will each have 2 minutes to speak. Otherwise, you will have 1 minute. Tonight, we have 7 speakers. Once your time is up, you will be asked to quickly wrap up. If you feel unable to convey your message, you may email boarded@aps.edu. In addition, for those of you here tonight, a representative from our service center is here to assist you. Mr. Gonzalez, will you please introduce the speakers?
Thank you, Board Member Astorga. Our first speaker this evening is Sam Colombo. Sam, you have 2 minutes once you begin speaking. Thank you.
Good evening, Board President, Superintendent, and board members. I am Sam. I'm the campaign manager for 24/7 for Tobacco-Free Schools. I am here because on November 7th of 2023, the New Mexico Public Education Department put into effect a new rule requiring that all public school districts have a comprehensive tobacco policy. Under a truly comprehensive tobacco policy, tobacco and nicotine use, possession, and distribution are prohibited by anyone, anywhere, at any time. So currently, APS has just the staff and visitor policies to update. I was taking a look, and right now, the student policy for tobacco looks great, and so does the advertising policy. So currently, there just needs to be additions and updates to the policies for staff and for visitors. I am happy to be a resource in this process. It is my job to help districts with everything that they need to adopt comprehensive policies. And we have different sorts of resources that we can help including example language, tobacco-free signage that we can send free of charge to all districts. We've already sent it to El Dorado High School, a toolkit with resources and faculty training resources as well. That's really it. There's been a lot of progress already with the district's tobacco policy, and which is great. And I would love to be a resource as APS continues the journey towards tobacco-free schools. And since I have some time, these are what the signs look like. This is our window decal, and we have other signs that are larger and posters we can send as well. But thank you for your time, and I hope you have a good day.
Thank you. Our next speaker is last name Kidwell. I don't want to say the first name incorrect. Chadman? Chadman. You have 2 minutes once you begin speaking.
Good evening. I'm here to speak about the right sizing committee. I don't think it's met since last August, but I've been following its progress for the last year. And I just have concerns about how it's affecting the communities of the schools that are being affected by the decisions that it makes. And this is the only place I can come to speak about those. Based on the parent engagement survey that I just completed, the questions were pretty universally based towards families who may or may not stick with APS, families who may be considering private or charter schools. That's not me. My children went through Washington Middle School's dual language program, started out at Coronado, and now one of them graduated Albuquerque High, one of them graduated from Highland. But I know that there was a plan in the works to possibly add a middle school portion onto Coronado. Don't know what the status of that is. But again, that would have devastating consequences for Washington, which has the oldest dual language program, which we are working hard to keep staffed. But since there aren't enough dual language teachers within APS, then we have a trouble there. And if you add on an additional middle school for Coronado, that problem becomes worse. I have reached out to Coronado. I have tried to build a bridge with them. It's been tough going. I've emailed the new board members. I need 20 minutes, not 2, to really dive into this. and my concerns, but nobody's talking to Washington. Nobody's looping us in. We don't know what's going on. It's really frustrating. But, you know, as a parent who believes in education, who believes in my kids, that the way I support it is, but my kids showing up for it, I'm going to stick with APS, even when I don't feel like sometimes that the district is sticking with me. I'm not going charter. I'm not going private. I'm here, but I'm trying to engage. And all I ask is that you all loop us in and help us, you know, keep us informed and then listen to our concerns about the plans that you have. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Porfirio Lopez Morales. No. Okay, I don't see that person. So next is Mr. Ed Briggs. Sir, you have 2 minutes once you begin.
Good evening. I just wanted to come and take the opportunity, Superintendent Blakey, congratulate you and the wisdom of the board. I have Iowa connections I'm from the Midwest, and my family's educators in Iowa, and they applauded the fact of your wisdom of picking Superintendent Blakey over your other candidates. I wanted to say that. A packet I'm going to leave here, I presented to the last board intact. Heather Benavides and I had a nice chat today about this. I know protocols leave it back here behind me, so I will. On some interventions for middle school and building success for the guardrails. So I'll leave that here. I was recently had a very pleasant discussion with Ms. Heather Benavides about some of these items. Marcella Jones and I are laughing. She says her hair is dyed, makes her look younger. Mine didn't die. I'm an older guy. Some of you probably don't know who I am, but I was an APS for 34 years, and I was a principal at Grant Middle School 13 years ago. We were the first community school center in the state, and I support the community schools. I had the pleasure of meeting and attending some of their meetings at the M building, et cetera, talking about community schools, so I feel the board continues to have that flag flown for community schools. So those are 2 points I wanted to make tonight. And the strategies in that packet were needed at Truman Middle School. And you're talking about the bilingual school. We started bilingual school years ago at Truman, but we had failure rates. Failure rates were corrected at Truman Middle School. Then I moved to Grant Middle School. We re-engaged the program there. Failure rates dropped dramatically at Grant, building on success to Manzano and Sandia. So I hope you'll be happy to look at that packet. And also in the packet I included, I'm a member of the Eden Optimist Club, and we sponsor a Camp Shaver scholarships to kids, 35 to 45 kids a year from APS and charter schools. If you're familiar with Camp Shaver is by Hummingbird, and we have 40 to 45 kids go to that on a free camp. I'll be out talking to the schools and recruiting kids this summer. I had the pleasure of a middle school. I used to teach at Van Buren Middle School when I was in the library 2 years ago with 35 kids. I said, how many of you kids have ever been in the mountains? Not one hand went up. I said, Sandias, Manzanos? Not one hand went up. So we exposed those kids at Camp Shaver. So you'll hear us flag the phone for that.
Mr. Briggs, you've gone over your 2 minutes. Go ahead and finish quickly, please.
Packet behind me. Hope you have a chance to review it. If you have questions, please ask. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Briggs. Our next speaker is on Zoom, Mr. Coker. I'll take care of it. Mr. Coker, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
You have 2 minutes once you begin speaking.
Sure. My name is Verlin Coker. I was originally here to talk about MAP. I do want to do a quick aside on the change to the governance handbook, I guess. Because those of you who weren't here during this whole kerfuffle back when a teacher had cut the hair of a Native American student, the community had often asked for a discussion to be had with the board on, you know, the way that Indigenous students are treated, and the various sorts of hate crimes that can occur. And through that conversation that I had followed up on the preceding months, it had came about that basically that you are technically allowed to, by the state law and the sunshine laws, to add or remove any agenda item during a meeting. This is just something you're able to do, but very specifically, you can't really do it unless it's for discussion only. And that's all we were asking for. And with this constant back and forth that I had between me and the previous board, basically they said they disagreed with the Attorney General on their ruling, and that's what this comes from. I just find it interesting that you had to put it in your own personal policy because the state doesn't actually support this interpretation of the law. But specifically for mathematics, I just want to bring it back to the proficiency stats that we do have, or at least from this goals and guardrails, aren't necessarily accurate. You can go to any school and just ask, and we're almost always in the single digits, especially in high school. In particular, this is a problem of curriculum. This isn't necessarily a problem of like policy or anything that you can really do unless you want to start actually adding in curriculum. But it is also a failure of technology. One of the biggest problems that we have is that none of the students' progress, individualized progress, tracks between grade levels and tracks between schools. And what we need is an actual holistic, it was described as like a teaching plan for my little brother for his family living services, is where basically you can have a piece of paper that says how to teach, you know, my little brother how to do the things that we're expected to do with him. It's a program that follows him to anything in the state, and it basically helps any ongoing teacher or community coordinator with him to be able to teach him properly in a way that works for him. This is a system that is very easy to do. It's already being done again for my little brother, that we need to start implementing in APS. We need to start looking at more innovative practices to actually address the core problems with mathematics in particular. Just on a baseline example, the large portion of our mathematics assessment is based on how well you can read the questions. And
Mr.
naturally,
Coker, I'm sorry, I've
see,
got to stop you. You've gone over your 2 minutes. Please wrap it up quickly and in a quick
Sure.
sentence.
And as you can see, English language learners are one of the most failing demographics. So please try to innovate.
Thank you, Mr. Coker. Our next speaker is in the room, Mary Ingham. You have 2 minutes once you begin speaking.
Yes, my name is Mary Ingham. Good evening to the APS chair and board members. This may be a new item or a reminder to some. In the New Mexico Constitution, we as voters have an opportunity to referend or stop laws that have been passed. These 6 laws that we chose were passed last spring and signed by the governor. We're collecting voter signatures in all 33 counties. This will allow us to place these laws on the ballot in November 2024, so that the voters of New Mexico can decide whether they wish to keep these laws or not. There are 2 laws that severely change our elections. The other 4 are related to children and removing parental knowledge and rights. Many of these things can occur in schools. So I'd urge you to go to notmykidnm.org or nmbadbills.com and take a look and see if you agree that we should keep these laws or referend them and stop them. Our hope with all the signatures is to get them on the ballot in November 2024. And may God bless our New Mexico children and families. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Our next speaker is Dr. Sanello. Dr. Sanello. You have 2 minutes once you begin speaking.
Well, happy spring, Madam President and school board members. My name is Dr. Geraldo Chanello, alternative health doctor and minister. The World Economic Forum's Great Reset greatly emphasizes the necessity to advance sterile sexual lifestyle, increase abortion, use vaccine to increase sterility and cause more death, and anything else to depopulate the world. They are determined to save the planet from too many humans who are allegedly the cause of climate change, formerly known as global cooling and then global warming. Global warming. So shouldn't that be global warning? Warning, this could be one of your own kids or grandchildren whom you love so dearly and precious to your hearts and soul. Far fewer humans will make it much easier for them to fully control every remaining person via their planned global digital control system. On the other hand, at local level, the APS school board members should greatly emphasize the necessity to advance educational lifestyle of reading, writing, and arithmetic, not sexual lifestyle of perversion, mutilation, castration, and sterilization. Do you ever wonder why New Mexico is still dead last in education and top 3 in crimes and suicide for many years? Are you okay with that? with no moral compass, not knowing the difference between right and wrong? If not, then please listen to your constituents and kids' parents who knows what's best for their children. Section 22-5-4 of the Public School Code, a local school board shall have the following powers of duties. Subject to the rules of the department, develop educational policies for this school district. That said, should you develop educational policies starting with reading, writing, arithmetic, not sexual policies of perversion, mutilation, castration, and sterilization, which are actually abortion and transgender among students? Thank you, and God bless you all.
Excuse me. Thank you. And that concludes public forum.
Great. Thank you to our public forum speakers. Again, as noted in Member Asorga's instructions, this is not a dialogue, but an opportunity for you to share your perspectives. So thank you for your participation in that. We will move on to agenda item 5.1, which is accepting the progress monitoring reports for goal 2, interim goals 2.1, 2.2, and 2.3 for math proficiency. Our presenters are Dr. Antonio Gonzalez, Chief Academic Officer, Dr. Chanel Segura, Chief of Schools, and Dr. Richard Bowman, Chief Academic and Strategy Officer, and perhaps Mr. Troy Hughes as well. Tonight, as I just said, we'll be monitoring goal 2 and the interims associated with it. Before we hear our presentation, we need to confirm that our monitoring report is complete. So we need to consider whether or not the report has all of the required elements. These elements are, number 1, the goal. Does the report clearly show which specific goal and interim goals are being monitored? Number 2, the data. Does it clearly show data for the 3 previous reporting periods, preferably on a line graph? B, does it clearly show the current reporting period? C, does it clearly show the target reporting periods? As requested during our last progress monitoring session, the administration is working on annual goal targets that it plans to share with the board in April. So we do know that it does not currently have annual targets, but we will by April. The next element is the interpretation. Does it clearly show the administration's understanding of system performance relative to the goal with evidence? 3, evidence and plan. Does it clearly show supporting documentation that evidences the superintendent's understanding of system performance? If the school system is not at target, or the superintendent's understanding of system performance indicates implementation is not on track, then does the monitoring report clearly describe systemic root causes, strategic responses, including rationale, and any needed steps? So there has been Q&A with technical and tactical questions submitted by the board members in advance. As we're continuing to work on refining our questions, we've learned that many of the questions we submitted in advance were actually strategic. So thank you for answering those strategic questions. We're going to try to continue and maintain just strategic questions during this monitoring session. I should also note that during the Q&A, there was a question as to whether the report includes all of the required elements, and an assessment that the report is missing an interpretation of why the district considers itself to be on track, given the data. So my understanding is that the administration is prepared to answer that question, and I'm getting some nods. However, the guidance that I have received from our coach is that because that interpretation was not provided in advance, we should consider tabling the report. So that's for us to be aware of as we move through the conversation. I think if it is tabled, that would simply be the opportunity to put your explanation that you're, I think, going to provide during this meeting and perhaps during the PowerPoint publicly posted in advance with the rest of the progress report. And then we would come back in our next board meeting and we could adopt or accept the progress monitoring report without discussion if all of the answers have been responded to. So are there any questions or clarifications on that before I turn it over to the administration for the presentation? Okay, great. Then I will turn it over to you. You have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board, and Dr. Blakey. We are happy to be here this evening to speak on the progress of goal number 2, focusing on our students' outcomes in mathematics for sixth, seventh, and eighth grade. We do appreciate your questions. They're really helpful. They guide us in the work, and they also provide us insight as far as what your interests are around the work as well. This process of progress monitoring has evolved since we started. We've learned a lot each time we go through this process. And as we transition between superintendents, we know that the process is going to evolve even more. So we do thank you for your feedback and your input as we try to work to make them as clear, concise, and just easy to understand and comprehend overall. So thank you for that. Before we get started, I do want to introduce my colleague, Troy Hughes. He's the Associate Superintendent for Goal 2, focusing with our middle school's staff, leaders, and students. So thank you for being here. All right, so as we begin looking at interim goal 2.1, that states that the percentage of sixth grade students identified in the Yazzie Martinez decision plus African-American students who demonstrate grade level proficiency or above as predicted by iReady will increase from 16.6% in May of 2023 to 22.6% in May of 2026. So when we look at the progress in this specific interim, we can see that since the fall of 23, the average math proficiency rate for our sixth graders grew by 5.7 percentage points from 17.5 to 23.2%. When we look at our specific student groups, our Yazzie Martinez and African-American student groups, they grew by 6.4 percentage points from 9.9 to 16.3%. Additionally, students in our targeted student groups, they haven't yet returned to the pre-pandemic math proficiency rates, but we are getting closer and exceeding mid-year rates from the past 2 years by nearly 4 percentage points. So when you look at mid-year from 2022 to 2024, we see a growth from 12.4 to 16.3 in growth. We also look at mid-year math proficiency rates for students in the targeted group is close to the year-end rates for the past 2 years. So our mid-year rate this year is at 16.3% students proficient or advanced, and that's comparative or close to the end of year rates for the previous 2 years. The concern with this data is that while our targeted student groups are making progress and seeing an increase, we're not seeing an increase at the rate of speed and outcome as our all other students who are not in our student targeted groups, which did see an increase from 45.6% to 62.9%.
And now, Madam President, members of the board, Dr. Blakey, we move to interim goal 2.2, which deals with our 7th graders. And the interim goal takes the same targeted student groups into consideration with a goal of grade level proficiency or above as predicted by iReady will increase from 13% of May of 2023 to 19% in May of 2026. So as we go on the journey to look at this specific grade level, we see that our math proficiency rate for 7th grade students grew overall by 5.3 percentage points from 13.2 to 18.5. When we look at our targeted groups specifically in the 7th grade, we see that they grew by 6.5 percentage points from 6.4% at the beginning of the year to 12.9 during their mid-year interim assessment. As we compare interim assessments for the targeted groups of students over the last couple of years, we see that they have stayed steady in where they are when you compare your mid-year and end-of-year assessments. We do have some concerns, like sixth grade. We see that our students in the targeted groups are not improving at the rate of all other students. So we recognize that that is a constant from sixth to seventh grade. We see that our seventh graders who are not Yazi Martinez grew from fall of 23 14.3 percentage points from 37.9 to 52.2. So we see that as a constant with the sixth grade.
Moving on to interim goal 2.3 is a focus on our 8th grade students identified in Yazi Martinez decision plus African-American students who demonstrate grade level proficiency or above, as predicted by iReady, will increase from 14% in May of 23 to 20% in May of 26. So since the fall of 23, the average math proficiency rate for our 8th grade students grew by 4.5 percentage points from 14.2% to 18.7%. The proficiency rate for our Yazi Martinez and African-American student groups grew by 5.5 percentage points from 7% to 12.5%. When we look at progress, the mid-year math proficiency rate of the targeted group cohort increased over last year when students were in 7th grade. So when we look at their mid-year, the same cohort when they were 7th graders last year, their mid-year was 10.3%. And this year as their 8th graders, the same cohort, their mid-year is at 12.5%. The mid-year proficiency rate for our targeted student groups is higher than it was at this time in the past 2 years and near where it was pre-pandemic. So we can see from the year 2020 to 2024, we are at 12.9. We took a dip in 22, another dip in 23, and we are up at 12.5%. Some of our concerns, like in the 6th and 7th grade, our students in our targeted student groups aren't improving at the rate of our student group, the all other students, who saw an increase of 15.2 percentage points from 38.9% to 54.1%. And again, like the other grades, our targeted student groups haven't yet returned to pre-pandemic math proficiency. So this chart is grade level or above proficiency in math. And we can see that the blue line is percent of 6th graders, the red is 7th graders, the yellow is 8th graders, and the green dashed line is our 5-year goal. So this demonstrates different cohorts of students at different times of the year, whether it be beginning of year, middle of year, and end of year for the past few years. That's reflected in the other charts. When we look at the next chart, this is looking at the same cohort of students over time. So as 6th graders and now that they're 8th graders. So we can see at the beginning of year that there is a slight decrease. When we look at their middle of year, we can see that there is an increase for their middle of year. And looking at the line from start of 23, 24 to mid 23, 24, it's a pretty moderate increase. And so we are hopeful that the projection will demonstrate at the end of year assessment that our students will be higher than previous years. We do have another chart. I'm not sure if you all have this chart with you. Yes? Okay. So this one here is just mid-year comparisons for your viewing. And so we can see that in the 19, 20, 22, 23, and 24 year, When we hit the pandemic, we see a dip, which is natural, but now we're starting to see that progressive incline in the curve. And so again, with this information and the data, we are hopeful that we are going to continue to see these gains over time.
And now we can talk a little bit about what's going well in relation to this goal. And the first thing is we can celebrate that all teachers district-wide have access to high-quality instructional materials and interventions. We are excited to complement these materials with units of study, which will bring them to life even more so that we are able to support our teachers with units of study that they're able to use as tools, especially our new teachers, as they're able to break up the curriculum and execute that work. We know that all of our middle school principals are trained in math interventions and have access to monitoring tools. So they have been trained not only on the intervention work, but how to access the data, to coach their teachers, to support their teachers with ongoing training and professional development. We're really excited, honestly, because we're almost finished with our first walkthrough to monitor Guardrail 3, which is monitoring the use of district-approved instructional materials. And that will conclude on Friday as a little bit of a plug, a 3-week window, which we visited those classrooms to be able to inform the board soon in relationship to the use of high-quality instructional materials, grade level standards, and differentiation in our classrooms. All schools have critical actions that are aligned to Goal 2 as part of their 90-day plans. So they're taking this work and they are this macro work and making it a little bit more of a micro version in their school level 90-day plan. And all of that has happened at every one of our middle schools. So specificity to the work is becoming more and more realized. More than 95% of our middle schoolers took the iReady interim assessment. That is huge. We know that students enroll and withdraw daily, transfer schools. So to be able to hit that mark and even exceed it is something to be very proud of. So we have concrete, reliable data that we are able to present to you. School scoreboards illustrate lead measures impacting Goal 2 progress. Walking the schools, we see that the data is coming to life. So data literacy is becoming something that's being embraced in our campuses. So they're able to have conversations on an ongoing basis, as opposed to waiting for annual assessment data to come at the end of the year. They look at it, adjust for the following year. No, these conversations are happening really in 30-day increments as they inform themselves in adjusting their 90-day plan. And ongoing training to strengthen data literacy and continuous improvement cycles is ongoing with our schools and principals. We know that there needs to be improvement in some areas. A couple that we want to just bring to the attention of the board is we recognize that the support to increase and improve the use of district adopted materials is ongoing. So really, we have them in the hands of teachers, we have them in the classrooms, but ongoing support for implementation, ongoing support for effective utilization of these tools is something that we will have to do really moving into the future as a support to not only this goal, but all of the goals and specifically Guardrail 3. Consistency in applying multi-layered systems of support approach in math instruction, specifically with targeted and intensive interventions, is something that we know needs to be worked on. We have had deep conversations about intervention and its correlation to enrichment and acceleration for all of our students, regardless of the level in which they are achieving at. We know that the push needs to be relevant and obvious for every single one of our students. So how do we support our teachers in making that real for every one of our students? So we are in scheduling season in the thralls of it. And those are conversations that we are having with principals as they have one leg in this school year and another in next school year in setting up the systems and structures to do things just like this as we anticipate moving the goal along and the continuous improvement and hopefully growth therein. We've done something a little bit different to contextualize next steps, and we hope to bring this aspect to life even more as we move along the progress monitoring journey, is connecting our next steps to the strategic priorities within the context of the strategic plan. So they are not separate initiatives, they are one. And the work plan, the strategic priorities within the strategic plan, we hope to bring to your attention and make connections as we move forward with showing the strategic priorities brought to life within the context of progress monitoring. For example, we recognize that under strategic priority 2, rigorous instruction, we need to support that high quality district adopted instructional materials that we spoke of earlier. Quality teaching committee developing grade level units of studies to support quality classroom instruction. Those units of study is something that we are really excited and hopeful about. And the plan is really to have the first several units available to teachers at the beginning of next school year, so we can assist them in getting a strong start to the school year as we continue to build these units of study for the entire year for ELA and math, K through 12. So we're working with our teachers, really fostering teacher voice in making sure that these tools are applicable and usable by them. And it's heavy work. It's a lot of work really connecting dots and making them relevant supports for their work. And develop a district-wide approach to math acceleration, kind of talking about that intervention and acceleration for every single student within the system is something we are in fact hoping to embed into the professional development at the launch of the new school year, with this topic being really front and center. In relationship to strategic priority 1, which is clear instruction, is posted scoreboards illustrating lead measures impacting goal 2 progress, so that there's that culture of data literacy, there's that continuous focus on the journey that each school is taking based on their 90-day plan, which is informed by this goal. And finally, strategic priority 3, engage students, is really making sure that we have all of our students engaged in relationship to consistent application of the multi-layered system of supports with targeted and specific interventions for our students. So just wanting to connect this to the work of the strategic plan, our intention moving forward is to bring specific strategic priorities and name them in the work of the next steps as we move forward, in really connecting the work of the goals with the strategic plan. And with that, Madam President, members of the board, we stand ready to answer your questions.
Great, thank you, Dr. Gonzalez, Dr. Segura, Mr. Hughes, and Dr. Bowman. We will now open up the floor for our monitoring conversation. As a reminder, we've asked questions that are technical or tactical. We had the opportunity to ask questions that were technical or tactical in nature before tonight's meeting, so we will not be asking those tonight, and I'd ask for support from other board members to ensure that we're not. As an example, technical questions are questions to understand how something is measured. Tactical questions are to understand how or by whom something is done. So we're going to focus on strategic questions, which are questions to understand how something aligns to the goals and guardrails. I also want to note that we have received training on ineffective questions as well, so we are going to try to refrain from using those also. Examples of ineffective questions include anything that is really just a board member opinion or a recommendation around what the superintendent or the district should do. So we will refrain from trying to give you advice on what to do in the guise of a question. Anything that is a statement or question that doesn't reference the data included in the report or requested by the board. Anything that isn't actually a question, but it's just a statement or an opinion. Any statement or question about what will happen next that isn't grounded in previously asked questions or again in the report. And so I want to note again, that there was some concern around whether the report included all of the criteria. I think you did provide much of the needed criteria, including in the line graphs that we saw, which allow us to see students compared year to year, end of year, year to year, middle of year to year, and beginning of year, year to year. I think the concern is that information and that interpretation was not included in our progress monitoring report. So since we didn't have it in the report, we may not accept the report, but we also may not decline to accept the report. We could just table it until later. So that's that. And there's one other point I was supposed to mention. Where'd it go? Maybe I'll find it in my 5 pages of notes that I have here. But we'll go ahead and move to questions. I'll start on the right and we'll go through one question at a time and then cycle back around if there are more questions.
Thank you.
Member
Okay.
Tapia Romero.
Yes. And Board President, please let me know if I'm not on track. So my question is specifically around when we talk about support for the staff. I guess I want to know exactly what does support mean? Are we talking about training? Are we talking about accountability? How are we measuring what support is in order to reach the outcomes? That work?
What support strategies are you using to reach?
What support strategies are you using to reach the final goal of our outcomes? Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair and Board Member Tapia Romero. So looking at it at a micro level, it's providing the aligned professional development that we give to teachers, but also to principals, so that it can get to that second layer where principals are then able to go into classrooms and coach their teachers, provide ongoing feedback to the teachers. So I think it's this ongoing process, multi-layer from district to the school by means of getting to that classroom, because we know that in the classroom is where the real change is going to happen. And so providing our principals, they've been through 2 years of really impactful professional development to help craft their knowledge, their approach, and expertise. And so now it's utilizing what they learn in the content-specific professional development to then go back to the school, reinforce that within the school with all the teachers, and provide that feedback as they visit classrooms.
Madam President, Member Tapia Romero, Dr. Blakey, a couple of thoughts in response to that specific question. One is a recognition that a relaunch or refocus on the standards is something that we know we need to really delve on and build off of as we move into the new school year. At a very fundamental level, by grade level, what are those essential standards? What are the standards relevant to math, for example, in this case? And how do we embed them and bring them into life in the units of study? And I think the hope is that we're really going to see something really pop when we get these units of study in the hands of teachers to complement the materials. The second point is ongoing support for our teachers and principals in the use of the materials. For example, we've been doing these walkthroughs to really inform ourselves of what's happening in our classrooms. We recognize that materials will never be the silver bullet independent of high quality teaching. So supporting our teachers in their pedagogy, in their methodology, in their practice is absolutely critical as we complement the materials with that. So our teachers and our principals have gotten training just a couple of weeks ago at a principals meeting. We really had a conversation with our principals around how do we ensure that if a classroom is not, what is high quality instructional materials? We know what district adopted is, but if it's not being used, what is the conversation that we can have along the indicators of really being a support to what is being used and really being critical friends with each other as we really promote what's happening in each one of our classrooms. So that's another example as we move forward. And finally, as we do these learning walks and these walkthroughs, feedback to the schools on what we're seeing in short order. So as we walk away, our SAPR team has been very generous with their time and expertise in committing to get our schools kind of a read on this is what we're seeing, so that our principals have another tool at their disposal to have conversations with their staff as we journey along the line of the specific goal.
Great, thank you.
Can I ask one more?
Yes, can I ask any follow-up?
Yes.
Oh, is it a follow-up?
It is.
Okay.
So in relation to the tool that we talked about, how quick are we getting the feedback to principals and teachers so they can make adjustments as needed?
Madam President, Member Tapia Romero, we've had these conversations. We conclude on Friday. So we are done with our 3-week window, and we will have visited, I believe, over 200 classrooms district-wide to provide the next sample. And our commitment from our SAPR team, and somebody will pinch me if I'm not correct, is really as early as next week to get that data out to our schools so that they have their school level data, so that they're able to have a read, a measure feedback. I mean, if I'm a principal and I have a team going into a school to kind of provide some, I want to know, I mean, I want to have feedback to be able to discuss at a staff meeting, to visit with teachers about, to support teachers as we move along. So very soon.
Good. Thank you.
Thank you. Member Astorga?
Thank you for your presentation. I have 2 questions. My first one is, what strategies has your team used to close the learning gap that students have experienced due to online learning during the pandemic? And how can us as board members support these efforts and improve student outcomes?
So Madam Chair, Board Member Astorga, and Dr. Blakey, we have really put a strong effort into our multi-layered systems of support and training our teachers on what that looks like school-wide to make sure that we are trying to really target the needs of every student. And that is a big challenge. But I think we're now we're starting to hear the utilization of common language, sharing of best practices, and we also have additional tools and resources. I know that we partnered with Paper for additional tutoring, and we finally got it to where students can access it 24/7. So that's also exciting, and we've seen an increase in the use of. So there's that. We have looked specifically at like our master scheduling process, because a master schedule will make or break a school. And we have been coaching principals, have been identifying, key areas of support, looking at equity across schools to see who has what and why this school may have this and this one doesn't. So we've been working on that, but I think specifically targeting those, the learning loss that took place during the pandemic is a real strong focus in the MLSS process.
Thank you.
Member Dominguez.
So with regard to the data, is there an opportunity in the graphs that you presented just now for a root cause analysis and in particular for our Martinez, Yazzie, and African American subgroups?
I don't know, so I'm asking my fellow board members, if opportunity for root cause analysis is a suggestion. We're comfortable with.
Have you used a root cause analysis in your strategy when you are looking at the data?
Are you considering root causes Because I'm not seeing that in the report. In particular with the subgroups that we've focused on.
Madam President, Member Dominguez, members of the board, Dr. Blakey, yes. And a good example of that is at each school level, their 90-day plan calls for a specific and intentional root cause analysis around layer 1 instruction, in this case, math. So since we know that one of the things we're celebrating is that every middle school's 90-day plan is connected at this point to this goal, it is fair to say that a root cause analysis has been done around this content area in relationship to their 90-day plan.
So may I ask when we'll see that?
We can definitely bring examples or share examples. They exist at this time at every school's site 90-day plan. And that is something that is readily available.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, Board Member Dominguez, I'm trying to understand the question here. I think if we're talking about the school's 90-day plans, we do have those archived on our internal site, and we can provide as many school 90-day plans as anyone would like to see. And each of them does include that root cause analysis.
We appreciate that offer. I am being told that that's out of our lane. So that is content for the superintendent administration to be evaluating and assessing, whereas we shouldn't be reviewing 90-day plans. But I think the question as to understanding root causes of the challenges and strategies to address the root causes versus symptoms is the relevant information that we do need and can have. So as that progresses, I think that would be helpful to be sharing. Any more follow-ups, Member Dominguez?
Not right now. I do have follow-ups, but I think what I'll do, I don't feel like some of the questions I asked initially were answered fully. So I don't know if it's better to just, because they're more tactical, I think I'll do an email.
Which I think is entirely appropriate, particularly if we table the acceptance of the report. So there'll be an opportunity to ask more technical, tactical, and more follow-up and make sure that we have all the information we need in order to know if the criteria is there to accept. So Member Benavides.
Thank you. First of all, congratulations on getting 95% participation on the interim assessment. That's fantastic, and I'm sure it was no easy task. And so my question, which I know is strategic because I submitted it ahead of time and was told it's strategic, I'm going to ask it again. So within the progress monitoring reports for each grade level, 6th, 7th, and 8th, the first comment under what is not going well is the need to increase the use and support for the use of district adopted curriculum. Is the use of the curriculum optional for teachers? And if so, what is the strategy or what strategy is in place to encourage its use? If mandatory, does a strategy exist to address the use of non-district adopted curriculum?
Madam President, Member Benavides, members of the board, Dr. Blakey. Yes, we do want high quality instructional materials in every one of our classrooms, and it should be facilitated without exception. Now, the question comes into play if materials are being used that are not district adopted. And that is really the place in which we find ourselves working with our principals to really look at the different indicators. There's 9, free of bias, culturally and linguistically responsive, research-based, et cetera, that facilitate a conversation. So if not this, what? And talk to me about how it meets the aforementioned criteria as to ensure that it is a high quality material that will facilitate the teaching of grade level standards. So absolutely, we celebrate the art form, the creativity of teaching. We want there to be innovation in the classroom, but we feel a responsibility as a district to make sure that we provide the baseline in the materials in which we provide, and that we support with the number of schools that we have supports a real question. And our ability to do it well is another question. Right now, we have several resource teachers making their way throughout the district to support our math departments in their rollout and implementation of the curriculum, and really helping them get as close to as possible to doing what we're asking within the school.
Thank you. Any follow-ups to that?
No, thank you.
All right, Member Jackson. Okay.
So I'm also looking at the three requirements that we need for a progress monitoring report. And one of that is evidence that shows that the superintendent understands how the data looks the way it does. And throughout your presentation, I heard the use of the word hope a lot. And I too am very hopeful, but hope is not a strategy. And so what my question is how can you, let's see, show a direct correlation to the increases that you are seeing to what it is that you all are doing, instead of it just being a natural bump that might have occurred anyway? So my question is, do you have evidence where you can say this worked really well at a school that had and I'm not asking you to name specific schools, but did you look at, this is really working well, we saw an increase here, and this is a strategy that worked really well here, and there was a decrease or maybe not as significant of an increase over here, what did they do differently? Was there a compare and a contrast to show specific evidence as to why we're seeing these increases?
So Madam Chair, Board Member Jackson and Dr. Blakey, we pulled the data and we identified the growth of the top 10 middle schools and the ones who had the least amount of growth. And there were some anomalies, like, wow, what are they doing? And so I know that our associate and team are looking into that. I would have to say what we would, we have had a very strong focus on this in trying to align what is happening at the district down to the school level, down to the classroom. I think a stronger alignment that's ever happened than in the past. Everybody is, like I said, utilizing the same language, has the same understanding of where the goal, what the goal is, and is working toward that. We have goals, which is a big deal. So I think just that shift in focus, we're looking at, like I said, master schedules to look at the time that is being allocated to literacy and numeracy within the master schedule, how intervention and acceleration is taking place within the core class versus being pulled out to have that, where the kids then miss their core instruction. So I would say, again, we are expecting our middle school, all schools, but specifically for this school, our middle schools to be tracking how they are, what they are doing at the school site level based on their 90-day plan to monitor. They've all identified a lead measure. Maybe it's going to be that they are taking 20 minutes, each day to focus on something, a specific skill. and monitoring that over time. And so they're doing those specific things with the outcome in mind. So we don't have direct correlation. I think that would take a deeper dive. So we're starting to do that. But again, when we look historically at the data, we can see that, you know, the trajectory is positive. And so.
And Board President, Board Member Jackson, and members of the board, and to go on that subject, I have asked the team as we kind of do this transition, and I'm getting more involved in the work of the team and doing the progress monitoring. I have asked them to look at what the top growth in schools are and which schools are struggling, because I think to your point, there's a lot that we can learn from positive practices that are being done currently in schools. And the more principals are able, we might have a school that was struggling and went the wrong way. And we saw some schools that had huge growth. And if those principals can have that conversation, I think it gives them some realization and some promising practices that they can incorporate, and then we could build on, rather than trying to pull something out like, you know, from somewhere we think is a good idea, but to see what's actually working in our schools for some of our kids. Because we have, when I reviewed the data at quick glance per school, we have some schools doing some pretty amazing growth that is beyond the like trajectory of what would be the norm. And we have some that are struggling. And I think the more we're able to build those connections so that schools are able to coordinate with each other to see what they're doing in order to get those growth, I think that we'll have a faster increase in what we see in the classroom as far as the proficiency.
And this, Madam Chair, Board Member Jackson, and Dr. Blakey, one of the things that you're seeing here in this set of monitoring reports is that it does start with the goals. And what you're seeing over this last year is a lot of work developing the methods by which we intend to track both the goal and the progress towards the goal. And so it's kind of tricky to go back a few years and say, well, what did you do now that made changes back then? Or what were you making changes back then when we didn't have the focus of the goals to sort of guide that work? And so I would just say, like, kind of these are sort of still early conversations, and they're these baselining conversations, but you are seeing, you know, now we did go out to 200 some odd classrooms and say, are we using high quality instructional materials? We didn't really know the answer to that question a few years back, at least not in a quantifiable way. And so these goals and guardrails have helped kind of build the structure to measure it. And I would anticipate that in the future, not just like we're looking at the top 10, the bottom 10, but we're also working on more sophisticated methods to track this and to be able to say stronger, to make stronger inferences about what and why. So this is early times, is kind of like the summary of that. It's early times, we're building the structure, and in the future, we'll be able to say more.
Yeah, yes. And again, the work that you guys have done is like monumental and very much appreciated. What I'm slightly concerned about is kind of based on what you just said, is that the method is being determined right now. So if we look at like just looking at 7th grade math, where the mid-years are all the same, how can you say that if we're staying steady, how does that correlate to us improving or being on track?
So if you're
as a
looking at-
follow-up, if that's okay.
So in 7th grade math, we moved at the middle of year from 9.9 to 10.3 to 12.9, which was a 2.6% increase.
Sorry, I'm looking at page 10, where the mid-years from 22, 23, and 24 are all within like that 13.0. So
End of years are all within 13, but.
Oh, let's see, I need my glasses on.
We're comparing end of year to middle.
Oh,
of year.
mid-year, okay. Oh, okay, okay. Then never mind.
Well, I want to get to Member Tomorito, but I think my question might be related to what you're trying to ask. So maybe. Member Tomorito.
Thank you, Madam President and board members. I'm in looking at all of this, it is the lack of how are we going to move forward. And I know with all the multiple visits that have occurred, could you tell me when we're looking at the multi-layer system of support and doing things differently, what is that going to look like? And based on your visits, how did you determine that that needed to change? And so we could be more effective in reaching these goals.
Madam President, Member Tomorito, members of the board, Dr. Blakey, kind of two questions or two thoughts. The first is, how did we identify the multi-layer system of support as an area of intentional focus as we look at this goal? And I think part of that conversation is a couple of things, recognizing the need to ensure common language system-wide around what this is. And it is not the beginning to the SAT process or to special education, but rather it is an opportunity to intervene, to support, to be strategic in the way we are individualized with our students in a very scientific way. Is something that we've recognized maybe is not as comprehensive or has not been done as well as it should be. The good news is we now have MLSS coaches that are deployed district-wide to support this work and to ensure that we are doing it well and facilitate staff capacity with this. Now, 4 is 4. The argument can be made that we need more, but we are learning a lot from the input they're giving us. And that input that they are giving us, we hope it matriculates to other departments so that we build a broader span of MLSS support within our curriculum and instruction department, within our language and cultural equity department, the work of Title I, et cetera, so that we're building a culture of acceleration and intervention within every one of our departments so that it facilitates common language and common support to schools. So that's the first thought in relationship to that piece. The second part of your question, I think, had to do with the walkthroughs. Is that correct? And what we're learning through the walkthroughs?
Yes. What are you seeing that, one, because you mentioned it has to be done differently and with these multi-layers of support. So I was just asking, what through your walkthroughs are you seeing that needs to be done differently?
Thank you, Madam Chair, Board Member Tomorito, and Dr. Blakey. It has been a really great experience to be in the schools and in the classrooms to see what our teachers and students are doing. When we say we need to work on MLSS, the process, what we're primarily seeing is a steadfast commitment to layer 1. And there is not a bridge to layer 2 within the classroom. So we're seeing a lot of whole group direct instruction. And I think, we also have seen small groups, but I think that's more of a collaborative structure rather than an intentional practice to take some more time to give more targeted support to certain groups of students. And so what we've learned is that we do need to work on layers 2, and also for the students who are in need of even greater support, more intensive support, what does that look like within the school? And what are we doing as a district to support the school to be able to implement that without really having to pull students out of their core curriculum.
And if I may, Madam President, Member Tomorito, just one more thought in relationship to that is I think a lot of what you are referencing may be found within the context of Guardrail 3.3 differentiation. And through our process of designing the tool that is being used to gather the data that we're going to use to inform our next steps, I'm excited to see what that looks like in relationship to the notion of differentiation within the classroom, so that can help us inform our professional development, our support, our conversation. I think a lot's going to come from looking at the data and being able to inform our next steps as we conclude on Friday with this first official run through ourselves.
Thank you. Any more follow-ups to that, Member Tomorito?
Just one more. As we're talking about the high quality instruction and that our teachers are receiving, could you explain just the pathway that this is proceeding for our substitute teachers? I would appreciate just, the steps that it's taking to not only give them the high quality instruction, but are you seeing outcomes with that, or are you seeing benefits through that, or have you put those things in place?
So I think this one may be tactical.
Okay.
Out of bounds because substitute teachers were not mentioned in the report.
Okay, that's good then.
But that would be a fine tactical email follow-up question.
I will do that. Thank you.
All right, so I think this builds on Member Jackson's question, and I think Member Astorga's question around targeting students, particular students who are experiencing the greatest gaps. So in your presentation, you said students in the target group aren't improving at the rate of other students. We're not seeing an increase at the rate of all other students. So my question is, if we're not seeing increases amongst those student groups, the target groups, how can we rate this on track? And why aren't we seeing increases amongst those target groups? So I think the fundamental question for me is, why are we considering this progress to be on track versus off track? Because I would be very comfortable with an assessment that our progress is off track, because as I look at this data and as I look at single digit proficiency rates, I think we owe it to the public to be honest about this is not acceptable. But I guess what I'm looking for is just, given that students in target groups aren't improving, can you justify why you're rating them on track? Why everything overall is on track?
Madam Chair, members of the board, and Dr. Blakey, when we looked at the data and interpreted the data, we looked comparatively at middle of year or beginning of year longitudinally, as well as middle of year and end of year. And so with that, we did see increases in our Yazzie Martinez and African American student groups. We did see the increase. We didn't see it at the rate of our all other students, but we did see an increase. And so with that, if we look at our target, it looks based off of historical data and trajectories that we would be on track to hit our goal. And so that is where we looked to see our students are progressing, and the trajectory is at a pretty good incline to meet our goal.
Board President and members of the board, as Dr. Segura said, we are at the midpoint higher than we were at the end point, or just about the same, of May. And the goal itself, although we see the gap, the goal itself as written doesn't address the gap particularly. It's addressing the growth of the students identified in this decision. So although the team added in what the gap looks like, that isn't necessarily connected to meeting the goal itself.
Right, but I guess the question is then how can you meet the goal if Yazzie Martinez students aren't accelerating at a greater rate?
Yeah, so Madam Chair and Superintendent Dr. Blakey. So I think what's kind of what you're pointing out here is the goal is only the subgroup. And so it doesn't involve the rest of the students. And the growth that we typically see from middle of year to end of year historically is on track to hit the 22% or 19%, which, you know, admittedly is not a very, it's not a bar that we would like to stop, where we would like to stop. But kind of as stated, with that particular goal, the growth that we typically see is on track to hit it. But again, do we want to stop at 22% or 19%?
Yeah, no, I mean, my point is it's concerning that all of the reporting back is that students in the target group aren't improving or aren't improving at the rate. So if we're going to try to meet these goals, particularly for Martinez Yazzie students, we need to improve at an accelerated rate. They need to be improving at a rate more than the non-Yazzie Martinez students. And so for me, it was very helpful to see in the report the beginning of year to beginning of year and end of year to end of year and middle of year to middle of year. And so having that and having different types of graphs going forward informs that. I think though the question that Member Jackson asked around sort of the correlations, and because we're hearing a lot of we hope and we think and we don't know, which is why for me, I feel that the interpretation and the evidence are not in the report. I think for me, in the prior goal 2 reports, we were very baseline, like we had just the baseline data and just the beginning of year. So I was more open to accepting. But now I think since I'm still hearing so much of we hope and we think and we don't know, and not seeing the complementary progress, for me, that's concerning. So we will go back through the line to see if there's any other questions that are strategic in nature from the board.
No.
Nope.
I have one just going off of Board Member Tomarito's question. What are some examples of good implementation of high quality instruction and interventions that you did see during your walkthroughs? And how can we engage more schools in using these strategies or processes?
Madam Chair, Board Member Astorga and Dr. Blakey, in our walkthroughs, when we visited 2 high schools, we were really pleased to see that when we went into 9th grade classrooms, they were utilizing, they were all learning about Romeo and Juliet, and that the teachers were utilizing the resource to help provide access to the students to be able to access the grade level standards. That was something that I don't know that we would have been seeing even last year. When we'd walk into Algebra 1 classrooms, we would see the same thing, and students would be engaging in the work. Teachers would be utilizing the instructional materials to be checking for understanding. Students would be self-assessing, working in groups to problem solve together. And so I think those are some of the things that we are looking to continue and to hopefully, that it will grow throughout the district. This was just Dr. Gonzalez and I going to 2 of our high schools. We saw about 35 classrooms, which was really, it was really exciting. And again, when we were in an 11th grade classroom and they were reading, the same thing, students were engaged in the same instruction, having access to the same methodologies. Teachers may have been using different tools to teach, but the materials that they were using were similar. And so that was encouraging for us because we, in visiting classrooms before, I don't know that we would have necessarily seen them.
Thank you.
Great, Member Dominguez.
I want to circle back around to Dr. Bowman's comments. And correct me if I'm off on this. I heard you say that there is progress, albeit not where we want to be. So there are pockets of success. Is that, or there is success for the subgroups? And so what are you all noticing about what's working in those situations?
So, thank you for
To clarify.
Yeah, so Madam Chair and Board Member Dominguez and Dr. Blakey, thank you for the clarification or the opportunity to clarify. So what we do see is that the proficiency for the subgroup is increasing. So it's not necessarily saying that there are absolutely pockets that can be determined from this particular report. However, I would sort of toss it over here to my right to say, as when you looked at those top 10 and the bottom, like, what did you see for folks who are doing really well?
Madam President, Board Member Dominguez, Dr. Blakey, I get the mic and I get to tell you the great work that we're doing at middle school, and hopefully not go too off rail here. The overall aspects of the data that we're seeing is we are growing at a better rate than we have over the last years. When you look at it, it's not just like a pocket or one or two. We are growing at rates that are faster and higher than before. And it's not just a random bump or it just kind of happened. It was an effort that we have put into play with your goals and guardrails that were put forth, with the direction from leadership to our principals, and our principals to our teachers, and our teachers to our students. They have embraced, more so than in the past, use of high quality instructional material. The C&I department has done a fantastic job in offering 2 full days of total professional development for our teachers. Every math teacher in the middle school has had opportunity to learn from the very best of what it is that we are trying to implement and how that implementation is happening. We have a unified computer-based program of IXL that we are using for acceleration, remediation that goes with that. We have provided the professional development. We will provide more. In looking at the data today, there has been over 12 million answers given on IXL, where that is our middle school students with the highest usage here are using that in an opportunity to target skills that they might not have had, and a teacher is learning how to access that material to better teach the student and to better support the student as they're going through. Is it perfect? No. But is it better than it's ever been with this direction? I'm going to say yes. And I'm going to say that our principals are doing a fantastic job. And I'm going to say that we as a unified group is growing here. I mean, the math, my simpleness of the math is, if we don't run out of gas, our little rocket ship is going to reach the line that we want to reach. I mean, we are there with it. And I'm saying, with the direction that we're doing, it's not just, 2 years ago, we're here, we're pre-pandemic. We are growing and we're going to reach our goal. And I think that is a part of what we're attempting to do. We have the want, we want to do it. We have the will now to do it, and we're going to win at it. We're going to get there to be able to compete where we're trying to get to. And I think that is something that we're losing sight of, is that it's kind of like the New Year's resolution, right? We're going to do this. Hey, I've lost 10 pounds. I want to lose more, but I'm 10 pounds lighter than I was on January 1st. And it's because I've changed my adult behavior. Our teachers are changing their adult behavior. Our kids are changing their behavior. Our community is seeing the importance of it that's able to go from. So I hope that answers that. It's not just pockets. I'm working with our 90-day team specifically to look at the critical actions that we have in place to be able to say, are we really aligning those critical actions? They're aligned to 90-day plans that go to their to goal 2, but are we having that impact with it? And then we'll be able to measure those and try to embrace it and share it with our principals. Sorry, I went off rail.
No, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Member Benavides.
I don't have another question, but I want to thank you all for being here and for a fantastic presentation.
Thank you, Member Jackson.
Yes, I have one more question. Let me get to it. Okay. I have things written all over the place here. Okay. So kind of one thing that I noticed about the report, and again, you know, we're all in development here, but we are trying to tighten things up, right? So I noticed that the what is working and the what was not working were copy and pasted into all three sections, right? Like they were all same between 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. And I also noticed that kind of what was working focuses on what is working is like what the administration is doing, and maybe what's not working focuses more on the schools. So my question is, what strategies have you all developed as an administration to kind of self-reflect on your understanding of what your role, your part, what data, what information you need to adapt in order to really change or to stay on the trajectory that we are on, but also to kind of address, you know, some of the questions that we have.
Madam President, Member Jackson, Dr. Blakey, thank you for that question. I think what you've just outlined has been our conversation over the last couple of months. Just reflecting a little bit, if I may, to the beginning of this journey, when we started our first progress monitoring, we were given, here's the instructions. And this is the methodology that we use to present this work to the board. And it was a very prescribed process, step by step. And we were wanting to do good by it. It was a new process to us. Progress monitoring in this fashion was new. So that took us through the first several months. And then we kind of got the hang of it, and we kind of recognized at a very fundamental level, we need to do a better job telling the story. And we need to recognize it really resonated when we heard this is a conversation with the board to the community. So that was very helpful, because this presentation should be a conversation that we have with our community. I mean, recognizing that they're watching.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't need a PhD in education to understand the conversation we're having. We shouldn't need to. It should be a conversation that is dynamic in that way. So a couple of things that we've kind of tossed around within the conversation is, as we're looking at what's working well and what's not working well, is I think it is fair to say that we have done due diligence within our group, our goal teams, to define that work, to talk to principals about that work, to look at the data to see what the interpretation is, to work with our SAPR team to really be best informed on what that looks like. But I think under the direction of our incoming superintendent is, how does the data help us tell that story? So really looking at, okay, fine, who are the top 10 schools? Who are the bottom schools? And really doing a case study and saying, okay, what are the celebrations? What are the challenges? And really through that process, through that protocol, teasing out what those what's going well are, and informing ourselves through that way. And informing our methodology and letting the data tell the story in a more powerful, in a more exciting way, as we get more sophisticated with this process, is something that I think we're embracing. We're trying to see how to do. There is nuance we will recognize in the goals. So really finding that protocol that will make sense for maybe goal 1 and 2, and then maybe it will be different for goal 3 and maybe different for goal 4, because the goals are specific. They should be specific. So, and then to Dr. Bowman's point, and then through that process, maybe complementing it with a very scientific approach to the conversation around the data, as he mentioned earlier, and complementing that process. So these conversations, I mean, I think yesterday we had a conversation in anticipation of Goal 3, which will be coming to you in about a month. And I got to tell you, it was one of the funnest progress monitoring strategy sessions I've been a part of in a long time, because we're pushing ourselves to tell the story, and we're pushing ourselves to really align the work and also bring the story to life to our schools and our end users. Because we have been over the last several months sharing this exact work with our principals at the next principal meeting. So there's that connection. But I think we all recognize the need to tell that story in perhaps a way that connects more with our community.
Madam President, Board Member Jackson, Dr. Blakey, to answer the question where it's, what are we seeing from the school level? How are we getting in there to hear that? We have a cadence of accountability that we use with our principal meetings, in which they're able to share their goals that they set forth, their 40X work, the book study that we did, and their wildly important goals, and they got lead and lag measures. But yesterday was, I think, our principal meeting. I'm going to say it was because it's kind of blurred, but the point of it was, is we had all of our principals together, all of our middle school principals together, broken up in different tables, and they're sharing their work. They're sharing what they're doing that is having an impact on the students and the learning that is tied to Goal 2. So everyone is there, and they're talking about, this is what we're targeting, this is how we're working, this is how we're adding interventions, this is how we're using advancement, this is where we're looking at our scheduling for next year. And the great part about it is I'm there, my PSS, Chris Sanchez, who does a remarkable job, is there. Shelly Henderson from Special Ed, she's there. And we are listening to our principals and hearing what they're doing. And it's not us hovering over and you know, making sure they're doing it, but allowing the professionalism of where are they having best practices and where are we sharing those best practices. And we give them time in a meeting structure to do that. And it's balanced. It's not just random on who wants to talk the most. We have certain people who have opportunities to speak, but we have that cadence of accountability that we are targeting the work and importantly putting it in front of them as a reminder, because you're going to have to speak next week. It means you have to have your stuff ready to go. And they own that, because they don't want to show up and be the one who doesn't have it. And I give a lot of credit to my support staff, but also credit to our principals for their professionalism and their leading their cause in their schools.
Thank you. Yes, I want to affirm my acknowledgement that I know that you guys have been working very, very hard. We also have a process that we have to align to. And so I think the discussion that has occurred tonight certainly has garnered more evidence, and especially Mr. Hughes, with you saying we're growing at a better rate and are faster than ever before. That's incredible information for us to learn, but it wasn't in the report. And so when we have to accept a report, whether it's on track, whether the evidence is there, I will just say right now, I'm not totally comfortable accepting it. I think it absolutely could, this discussion could be summarized and sent to us. But again, we're learning, and I'm thrilled because I know that there are people who are watching at home, because I know how I know this, because I get emails afterwards saying, thank you so much. But they also have questions. So I think this was a fruitful discussion. I would encourage, well, I'm not going to make a suggestion. It was a fruitful discussion. some of that information was evidence, but it needed to be in the report.
And if I may, Board President, Board Member Jackson, just so the team can have clarity on how to make it more clear as far as what Mr. Hughes is saying. So on slide 10, would that be helpful to put something like that on all of the slides that had the growth? So slide 10 says March 2024 progress monitoring interim goal 2.2 7th grade math. And the progress that the team put out says mid-year math proficiency rates for targeted groups of students are nearly as high as end-year rates from the past 2 years. Mid-year is 12.9%, end year of last year was 13, end year 2022 is 13.1. Would that type of language on the other goals be helpful to show the progress?
So Superintendent Blakey, I want to get to the last potential question from Member Tomorito. And I know there's also additional technical questions that need to be submitted from the board. So I think if we submit those technical questions via email, we can also submit to you or to board services to relay to the administration what it is that we would need to be able to accept the report. Does that work? But I do think the graphs that are here are like fantastic and exactly what we would need. That's my point of view. Member Tomorito, do you have any additional questions?
Just one. I'm really appreciative of how we're changing things up. And, as we're going back to Dr. Gonzalez and him stating that we have to change our narrative. And I'm glad they're very aware of that. And I just appreciate everything they're doing. And I know this is a new system and we're trying to also maintain to our roles, but I appreciate everything they're doing. And it's more of just a gratitude. That's all I want to state. Thank you.
Great, thank you. And so I just want to confirm, are there any more strategic questions from the board?
I guess I'd like clarification I'm going back to Superintendent Dr. Blakey's question. I think it'd be good to hear publicly what we want for us to clarify what we want from the presentation in the future. It would help me too as well.
Okay. So would it be okay if we move ahead with the progress monitoring, and then if it turns out that we don't accept the report or table it, then we shift to that? Or should we do it now? I don't know how people feel.
Well, I think hashing it out right now would be good. But I'll let others.
Yeah, so the coaching was, in order to accept the report, we need to ensure that it has the goal, the data, and the interpretation from the superintendent of system performance, as well as evidence. And what's missing is an interpretation from the, I'll say, administration on why it's rated on track. I think we received that in the conversation, but it's not included in the report. So I think that's one thing. I think the second is the graphs that compare year to year, not cohort growth over time. So beginning of year to beginning of year to beginning of year for 6th grade. And that's what you had in the report. And so I do think those line charts are what we need to see. And then to Member Jackson's point around evidence and plan, the third element didn't seem to be in there either. And so I think we just need what Dr. Gonzalez provided in his answer, more narrative on why the strategies you've selected in terms of walkthroughs, aligned PD, feedback, MLSS coaches, common language, tutoring the paper, master schedule, et cetera. What evidence do you have to support the claim that those things are going to lead to increases in student outcomes? Documentation that evidence is I think that's what I just said.
Yeah.
Are there others other responses to Member Dominguez's question?
I mean, I think you encapsulated it. I think the main thing is when you say we are growing at a faster rate than ever before, why? I mean, I think you said it, and we had this discussion here, but if I looked at the report, I don't know that I would be able to say why you are growing at a faster rate. And why 6th, 7th, and 8th grade might be different, because right now it's just cut and paste. Like you're doing the same work supposedly at 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, but they've got to be different. And I'm assuming that they're different. How are they different? And so I think the question that I kept asking myself was, okay, but why? And I didn't see concrete evidence that answers the why.
I think the last thing I'll just say is that it should have the annual goals as well. And it doesn't. Did we understand that's because they're not created yet, but for what it's worth, that's one of the dimensions that's supposed to be on the report as well. Is there any additional discussion on this report? So I want to thank the administration for all of your work during tonight's report, putting together this report, your responses, but more importantly, all the work that you're doing in the district to improve math outcomes overall. And I just want to respond to Dr. Gonzalez's comment around this is a dialogue with our community, and it's an opportunity to tell the story of the change that's going to happen. And I think to really acknowledge your point around this is a shift. This is a shift in the way of doing business. This is a shift in the way of measuring how we do business. It's a shift in adult behaviors. And we are all learning as we go. And so I think, well, learning is hard. Learning in public is even harder. And so I just want to acknowledge that it doesn't feel good to be told you're not doing enough, or this isn't on track, or whatever, or that your questions aren't good, or your questions are wrong in this way. But just acknowledging that this is all part of continuous improvement, and we're all learning as we go. And we need to be transparent about how we're learning and how we're improving, because that's what our community demands of us. And so I think as any one of us starts to feel defensive about we are not doing enough, we're not asking the right types of questions or anything, just to acknowledge again that this is just continuous improvement and we're trying to get better for the sake of our students. And so with that, at this point, I will entertain a motion on this monitoring report.
I move to table the progress monitoring report for Goal 2, interim goals 2.1, 2.2, and 2.3 math proficiency.
I will second. This is Janelle.
All right, we have a motion to table from Member Jackson and a second from Member Astorga. Can we have a roll call vote, please?
Janelle Astorga?
Yes.
Ronaldo Morito?
Yes.
Heather Benavides?
Yes.
Crystal Tapia Romero?
Yes.
Josefina Dominguez?
Yes.
Courtney Jackson?
Yes.
Danielle Gonzalez?
Yes. And so I'd like to ask board members, please submit any remaining questions you have that will help you determine the answers to the criteria and if they're here. So if there's a technical or tactical question, please submit it. I'll work with maybe Ms. King around figuring out a deadline, but I'm going to say submit it as soon as possible so that the administration can respond and repost the materials that are needed so that we can approve. And again, we don't have to have another discussion if all of the material is provided and if the board feels that the criteria are met, we could just approve without discussion. So with that, we will move to agenda item number 6. Thank you again for your presentations. Item 6 is our consent agenda. So I am seeking approval of the consent agenda. Is there a motion, please?
I move to approve the consent agenda on all 6.1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 items.
This is Crystal. I will second it.
Thank you. We have a motion to approve the consent agenda from Member Astorga and a second from Member Tapia Romero. Ms. King, can we have a roll call vote, please?
Janelle Astorga,
Yes.
Ronaldo Tamorito,
Yes.
Heather Benavides.
Yes.
Crystal Tapia Romero,
Yes.
Josefina Dominguez,
Yes.
Courtney Jackson.
Yes.
Danielle Gonzalez.
Yes, so the motion to approve the consent agenda carries. Next is agenda item 7, which is the president's report. So I wanted to share with the board and with the public that we will be appointing 2 new ad hoc committees. One ad hoc committee is going to look at potential for performance-based financial incentives for our incoming superintendent. I want to say Dr. Blakey's contract does include language that says the board and the superintendent in the evaluation structure may adopt performance-based financial incentives. Upon vote of the board to approve the incentives, they will be considered as incorporated into the employment agreement. So given that we've had conversations around the fact that the superintendent evaluation should be tied to system performance and needs to be based on the goals and guardrails overall, we want to take the next step of determining exactly what those measures are and how it's aligned to potential incentive benefits. So I'm appointing an ad hoc committee to work with Dr. Blakey on this. The members of this ad hoc Tapia committee. That was funny. My eyes are going too fast. The members of this ad hoc committee are Member Tapia Romero and Member Benavides. And the first step of the committee will be to meet with Dr. Blakey and our SOFG coach to ensure any incentives do align with student outcomes. And committee members will also be reviewing best practice examples potentially from other districts. And then we'll present a draft recommendation to the full board for review. This will be reviewed in executive session because it relates specifically to the superintendent's contract. And the deadline for this is August 1st. All right. The second ad hoc committee will be focused on lifting up student voice. It's aligned to our guardrails around community engagement, but also to our commitment to hearing from and listening and valuing students, very much in line with Goal 4 as well, in terms of giving them the self-efficacy to know that they're making a difference in our school system. Oh, sorry, let me add, I need to back up. The chair of the previous ad hoc committee will be Member Benavides. And the chair of the second ad hoc committee on student engagement will be Member Astorga. I will also serve on that committee and also want to note and thank our student interns. So the board is working with 4 student interns who have begun to talk to staff as well as board members, community members, and other districts to get a better understanding of how to include students in decision-making. And so this ad hoc committee is also going to really engage students in terms of how we figure out how to move forward with this. Because this is a bit of a bigger lift, the deadline for providing a recommendation to the board is just the end of the calendar year, so December 31st. And we'll have some comprehensive recommendations around how to increase student agency and student voice in the district, but also primarily with the board. So these 2 ad hoc committees will complement our current community engagement ad hoc committee that we already have in place. So this committee, which is chaired by Member Jackson and also is Member Dominguez and Member Astorga, continues its work, which right now is focused on setting goals for what community engagement looks like and community engagement by different groups. So that's why I'm excited that Member Astorga will chair the student engagement committee and sits on the community engagement committee to be able to have that overlap as we set goals for student engagement. Let's see. A reminder that according to our community engagement and outreach calendar, board members should be reaching out to community groups during March and April. So February was community engagement, which is when we hosted an event and brought people in. March and April are community outreach, when we go out to organizations and talk to them. And so we do have a tracker for this, so we can track which organizations, who's going out, et cetera. And so if anyone needs that, Dr. Albright can support with any support on that. I also want to note that we are planning an exciting event in partnership with the New Mexico United at the team's June 8th game to celebrate the end of the year. also to celebrate our students and all of our educators and to promote summer reading in connection with Goal 1. So note that date, June 8th. And stay tuned for more information. Next on student outcomes focused governance, just wanted to note that we had a contract in place that the board approved that expired in February 2024. And so that contract has been extended with the Council of Great City Schools through June 30th, 2025 for $20,000. This extension is going to allow us to continue our intensive training, including a 2-day workshop set for board members and staff at the end of April. So I'd like to ask board members, you have that date on your calendar, if you can please attend April 29th and 30th. And we will also continue to seek opportunities for board members to participate in one-on-one training as needed. And then finally, really exciting update. I am happy to announce that in large part due to the efforts of Member Jackson, APS will soon be a voting member of this is my favorite acronym in the whole world, the Albuquerque-Bernalillo County Governance Council, or ABCGC, which is currently called ABCGC plus APS. APS has traditionally served in an advisory capacity only, so we are adding us as a voting member. Who knows what the acronym is going to be after that? ABCGCA. I don't know, maybe y'all can figure that out. And that's Member Benavides serving on that commission as well. So the process for this is because it's a joint governing council, the city council is going to consider a resolution and vote on it. The Bernalillo County Commission will consider a resolution and vote on it. And then our Board of Education will consider the same resolution and vote on that. So we are expecting all of those steps to be completed within May. So keep an eye out for that resolution to come before our board in May, which would make us an equal voting member on that government commission. And with that, the next board meeting is Wednesday, April 3rd, 2024 at 5 p.m. at the Alice and Bruce King Educational Complex at 6400 Uptown Boulevard and live streamed at aps.edu.